Hello, beautiful people. I'm Red, and this is my raid tier list for 11.1.5 The War Within. If you could subscribe, it would really help me out, and I'll make a bunch more videos. So this season, I've played with every single healer that exists in raid, not as every single healer, but I've played with every single healer because of the comp that we've been using in different raids. So I feel pretty good about like deciding which healers are good, which healers seem good, like what their strengths are. I've also looked at a bunch of statistics. So what I did is I looked at total ramp, like maximum ramp levels for every healer, and I looked at the total HPS that healers are doing. I looked at death statistics. I looked at a bunch of stuff. So I put that all in the spreadsheet here. And this is partially how I'm making my decision, but it really isn't. Like, these numbers are nice, and I think it's pretty useful, but I don't think it's like the end all be all. Okay, so let's get into it. Disciplined priests are the first healer let's talk about. They used to be mandatory, now I just think they're very strong. Before the nerfs, they were like 23% stronger, and now they've been nerfed by 23%. So instead of overhealing by, 60%, now they're just overhealing by 30%, which is fine. And but the thing is, like they're still strong enough, and their ramps are very powerful. Like Disciplined Priest ramp is like uh, 10 to 15 million. Before the nerfs, it was like 15 to 20, even like 23 million as I've seen. So they are very strong. Now, the reason that they're so strong in this particular raid is because this raid has a specific set of requirements. You really need mega healing during healing absorbs, because if you don't get these healing absorbs off in time, your group is slowed or something else bad really happens, right? On top of that, Disc has a massive 2% DR that is constantly active. Well, not constantly, but it's active like 30% of the time on the party. And so, like, looking at their HPS bars, like, in aggregate, it should actually be, like, up here. It shouldn't be down here. They should be number one, probably. Like, they're still doing big healing, and they're a damage reduction healer. And then if you add Power Wood Barrier, which is obscenely strong, like, it's even a little higher, right? So, in my opinion, discs are still the strongest A tier healer, but they're not quite mandatory anymore. There are other healers who can perform the healing absorb duties. Evoker can perform them extremely well. Druid can perform them very well. So yeah, it's not as mandatory as it used to be. Okay, next up is the Resto Druid. I think Resto is a very good class. I don't think it's mandatory though, but you could make an argument that it's S tier. So it has a pretty unique healing profile. Like it's like every single minute it can do a like 8 million HPS ramp, and most classes it's like every 2 minutes or every minute and a half. So the fact that they have this extra healing coverage is goes a long way, because when you're part of a team, you have to cover every single damage event, and having one healer with a pretty low cooldown on or being able to cycle through abilities such that every minute they can cover something big, that's pretty strong. On top of that, their healing outside of cooldowns is very, very strong. And to top it all off, you can go into cat form and use Heart of the Wild and do damage for the first like 30 seconds of a fight, and then your damage actually looks good at the end of the fight if you do something like that. So I think Druid is a very, very good class. Up next we have Preservation Evoker. I think Preservation Evoker is good. It's arguably very good, but I don't think it's as good at its specific job as a Disc Priest. So Disc Priest and Evoker, I would argue, are very substitutable healers. They both have a minute and a half ramp that does 15 million HPS, so they both can accomplish the same goals. An Evoker can do the exact same ramp timings as a Disc Priest on Gallywix, and you'll do just fine. So you don't need a Disc Priest, which is why it's not mandatory. If Evoker didn't exist and wasn't like a direct substitute like it is currently, I would say uh, Disc would be mandatory, right? But because there's another healer who has that really, really, really big ramp on a minute and a half cooldown, they're just fine. Okay, so up next we have the Mistweaver Monk. Mistweavers are very, very strong, and I think they are mandatory. So there's a couple reasons for that. Like in the Race to World First, they were doing the most damage by far, like triple the other healers. So Race to World First people really care about damage, and us normal people, we don't really care that much. But it is something nice. Second is they have a teleport. So on Mugsy, they can teleport out of the cages, and that is very big boost for your team because you need to send a healer into the cage to keep those people alive, and somehow they have to get out. And another reason is that monks have a really unique healing profile. So they have pretty sustained HPS. It's not quite as much sustained HPS as a druid, but it's pretty sustained. And their ramps are a little bit higher than druid during their 2-minute window, and their 2-minute Chi lasts like 30 seconds. So add all that up is they're a good sustained healer with not super high peaks, not super low valleys, and they do pretty well. Okay, up next let's talk about Holy Paladins. So I think Holy Paladins are very good. Despite their representation, I think they are actually very good. Like, their representation I think would be a lot higher than it currently is if all the buffs were active like at the beginning of the season. Like, Holy Paladins are notorious sandbaggers. They complain about their HPS even when, like, it's just barely at the bottom, but it's like tied with all the throughput healers. Like, I'm talking Resto Druid, Mistweaver Monk, Evoker, the healers that don't have a damage reduction. And they act like they don't have a damage reduction. They just complain all the time. They say, "Oh, we don't have a damage reduction. We're doing low healing." It's like, yeah, but look at your damage reduction added. Like, the raw HPS of this paladin is like 4.6 million. You add its mitigation and it's 5.4 million. Its mitigations are absolutely absurd. They're obscene. So we're looking at this chart. It's like, yeah, Holy Paladin looks like it's not doing good. Oh, Holy Paladin's worse than Holy Priest. No, that's a lie. These are dirty, lying Holy Paladins, and they cannot be trusted. Their HPS bar is actually above the Druids. It's actually pretty freaking high. And they are sandbagging like no other. So, Holy Paladins will be buffed yet again, and it's just fine. So, that's my rant on Holy Paladins. I obviously don't like Holy Paladins, and there you have it. Okay, up next we have the Resto Shaman. So I think Resto Shamans are good. They're not great, but they're very good. So I think the strengths of Resto Shamans are they have pretty sustained throughput and then they have a pretty big ramp. Like, if they stack Ascendance on top of a Healing Tide totem, they can rival almost anyone in the game in terms of ramps. Even a Disc Priest, like a Resto Shaman with Healing Tide and Ascendance, that's arguably doing more than a Disc Priest ramp right now. Another reason that they're so good is they have Cheat Death on a 30-minute cooldown. So, like 4 to 6 times a night, they get a free death that doesn't count against them, and that makes their death statistics look really good. So when factoring that into my little equation, it makes them seem quite good. In terms of their healing profile, they don't like usually stack Ascendance and Healing Tide. So they are spreading those out. So it's like every minute and a half they have a pretty big ramp, similar to a Disc Priest, and I think that's kind of what Blizzard is going after. They're kind of like trying to make healers roughly like between their different cooldowns they have a minute and a half. So I think that's kind of how they're going about balancing them. They've gotten rid of some cooldowns, so it's not like every 30 seconds you can use a cooldown. They really hammered down on that in the past season. Okay, so the moment you guys have all been waiting for. What do I think about Holy Priest? Well, I think they're a B minus healer. They're just barely good. At the beginning of the patch, I would have put them in D tier or F tier. But they're a little bit better now. They got one buff, they moved up to D tier. They got a second buff, they moved up to viable. And now we've gotten like a third buff, and they're, you know, good enough. Let's look at the statistics. So, statistically, they're performing pretty close to all the other healers. You know, if we go down to the 75th percentile, they're at the bottom. But like at the max level, so like a very skilled player, that's who I want to compare. I want to compare the most skilled players with the most skilled players. Because at that 75 percentile, it's watered down with a bunch of other players. And their like theoretical throughput is very strong. You know, the thing is that they're not a damage reduction healer. Like, what do the top 3 healers in terms of HPS have in common? They don't have damage reductions. Then you have 2 damage reduction healers in between Holy Priest, and that just doesn't make sense. Like, in order for Holy Priest to be played heavily, it needs to be higher than the damage reduction healers, and it certainly needs to be higher than Disc Priest, because you compete directly with Disc Priest as a priest. And your raid leader will say, why don't you just play Disc Priest? And you might say, well, I don't like Disc Priest, it's not fun. But if it's enough better, your raid leader will say, play Disc Priest, please. Or we'll find a Disc Priest, right? So a lot of Holy Priests are pressed into that. So the healing profile of a Holy Priest is they have some pretty big ramps on like a 2 minute cooldown, and like depending if you separate Apotheosis from Divine Hymn, you can use them both at the same time. You can add Halo on top of that, depending on which spec you're playing, and you can have a pretty big ramp on a 2 minute cooldown. So they're not bad, they're viable, but they're not great either. So that's why I have them in B tier. I personally think they're doing pretty decent. Like, I've played Holy Priest in raid on Vexy, that's it, and I did a lot of healing. Like, I was top healer, so I was impressed.